Santiago Mesa told his wife, "Prefiero hacer mi trabajo a que ustedes se mueran de hambre. I'd rather do my job than have you starve to death." Although Mesa Lopez was a construction worker at the time, his side job was the one putting the food on the table. But Santiago was not building anything. On the contrary, he was deconstructing human bodies. Uy Cucuy, welcome back to the Mexighost Tales. I am your host, Denny Chavez, and today we will bring you our second true crime case in this channel, and probably this is one of the most infamous cases in Mexico's history. This case involves murder, assay, and gore, so as always, viewer discretion is advised. But first, if you are new here, all we talk about here is ghost stories, urban legends, conspiracy theories, true crime, and more hailing from Mexico. If this is your type of content, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our new episodes. And although we are bringing you cases from Mexico, we are open to suggestions. If you have cases from anywhere around the globe that you want us to feature or look at, we definitely want to hear about it. Leave it in the comment section. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok as the Mexighost. What is a pozolero? Rather, what is pozole? Pozole is a very famous stew in Mexico. It is made out of red chili, hominy, and you can either use chicken or pork in it. Just drop some cabbage, radishes, and lemon juice. Grab your tortilla chips, and you're in for a treat. It's very similar to menudo, so el pozolero means the stew maker. However, Mesa Lopez's recipe for pozole was very different from the traditional dish. More than enjoying this at a local restaurant in Tijuana, his ingredients were more reminiscent of the Breaking Bad series, and we will delve into this method further down the episode. Santiago Mesa was born in Guamuchil, Sinaloa. That's where he met his wife, Irma. He was then 11 years old and she was 9. Together, they fathered 9 children. Santiago was a construction worker, and the precarious situation forced him to move to Tijuana back in 1990. Santiago was a family man, very quiet, and for the most part, he kept to himself. He was a hard worker, but soon tragedy struck his family. His younger sister was essayed by members of a criminal organization. This event sparked his anger. He claimed he would get revenge and ultimately spiraled into the criminal world, joining the Arellano Felix brothers criminal organization. According to Santiago, his only motivation to join this cartel was to get back at his sister's perpetrators. When 1996 rolled around, he was a full-fledged member of the cartel. He was not an enforcer or a transporter or a sicario. He was actually a construction worker for the Arellano Felix brothers, mainly completing menial jobs such as taking care of horses and other less dangerous activities. One day, this would all change, as Santiago was, air quotes, invited by the cartel leaders to witness an experiment. He went to the place as he was ordered to go. Once there, he saw a metal drum that was filled with water and other chemicals. Then he was asked to drop a cattle leg inside the drum and leave it there for 2 hours. During that time, he had to stir the awkward mix. Santiago noticed that the leg meat was dissolving in the drum. Santiago stated that 2 Middle Eastern men were there to ensure that the experiment had good results. Months passed by and Santiago was called again for another experiment, which consisted of the same water and chemical mixture. However, this time he would not drop a cattle leg. He would drop human flesh. Once the experiment was completed, Santiago was notified that from that day forward, that would be his job. He would have men to help him with this task. Mesa Lopez was now in charge of basically dissolving human bodies. Obviously, he did not have any other option but to follow the orders given to him, and in 1996 he dissolved his first human body for the cartel. Keep in mind, when these criminal organizations, air quotes, invite different people for different tasks, it could be anyone from a young farm boy to a doctor, nurse, engineers, even celebrities. Politicians and priests are approached, and turning down the invitations is definitely not an option. Santiago followed the procedure to a T. His first victim was dismembered and the parts were submerged in the drum filled with the strange mixture. They waited all night. The next morning, the liquid showed foam. They placed the lid on it, got it on a pickup truck, and dumped the contents in a nearby creek. A few months later, he was asked to do it for a second time. Santiago refused. He was then kindly offered $600 a week for his inconvenience. Adjusted to inflation, we're talking about $1,500 in today's currency. This does not justify him in any way, shape, or form. Keep in mind, his initial motive was to get revenge from the people that harmed his sister, so it's highly unlikely that he did this just because he was forced to, and that's how El Pozolero was born. Every week, he would receive a call with the place and time where he and his group would receive the bodies they were to get rid of. They would meet up with a convoy in a remote location where they would take the bodies to their compound, where they would carve out the bodies and place them in the mix that would eventually dissolve the bodies overnight. Once that part was completed, they would dispose of the remains in a septic tank. The bones, nails, and teeth that were not disintegrated were burned and buried, so no evidence was left behind. The neighbors soon started getting suspicious of the activities taking place in El Pozolero's compound. The pickups and SUVs would go back and forth at all hours of the night. People who have visited the site have mentioned there's a sign that reads, "May God give peace to the ingredients used by El Pozolero." When Santiago was questioned about his activities, he would only shrug his shoulders and said he sold jello. Jello, out of all things. However, the people knew better. It was obvious that the comings and goings were cartel related, and they did not want to stir that pot. No pun intended. Authorities were hesitant to look into El Pozolero's activities. This was mainly because the smells were confused with a nearby goat hatchery. The smell of the decaying bodies would interlace with the goat's stool, and it was hard to pinpoint what was going on. In January of 2009, authorities received an anonymous tip. A group of armed men was having a party that had lasted a few days by that time. The military was dispatched to the area. Normally, when these types of calls come in, local police will rarely get involved as they are normally outnumbered and outgunned. When the military arrived, people at the party started scattering around. Santiago was extremely drunk, and he couldn't even run. He told the military man, "Do you know who you're messing with? Soy el Pozolero." The military command was quick to immobilize him and place him under arrest. Once again, the ego of another cartel member would prove to be his downfall. In his interrogation, Santiago confessed to his vile crimes. There were so many bodies that he disposed of that not even him could give an accurate number. He was taken to his compound by the authorities so he could show them how he disposed of the bodies. Once they arrived at the scene, they were in shock. Cutting instruments, protective gear, respirators, drums, and different kinds of chemicals were at the place. Santiago was indeed El Pozolero. When he was presented to the media, Santiago claimed that he had been getting rid of the bodies for 10 years at that point. However, during the investigations, forensics found remains anywhere from 15,000 to 17,000. None of the body parts would match between them. Take this with a grain of salt, as till today there is still more evidence coming out, and the numbers reported fluctuate from source to source, so this is kinda up in the air. In the most grotesque scene in this case, when military personnel arrived at a Pozolero's hideout, they found 10 bodies decomposing in the drums. 3 clandestine graves were dug out, ready to dump the contents in the drums. Authorities hit a full stop, as the chemicals used by El Pozolero would make it impossible for them to identify the bodies. The only possible way to identify them would be by their dental records. And to try to match those to the people was impossible, as the chemicals had deteriorated the teeth of the victims as well. The place where the majority of these activities took place is known as La Gallera, but there are other 3 locations where he did this activity. One of them was Ojo de Agua, Maclovio Rojas, and Loma Bonita. Like I said, these places were also spots where Pozolero would dispose of the bodies. To date, authorities have found 15,000 liters of organic emulsion, 350 kilograms of human bones, and more than 6,000 teeth. With these numbers, authorities calculate the number of victims roaming around 300 confessed by Santiago Mesa to upwards of 1,200. With all the evidence found and with the confession made by Santiago Mesa Lopez, authorities still claim there was not enough evidence to sentence El Pozolero. Finally, caving in to public scrutiny, in 2012, Santiago was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was charged with organized crime association and clandestine inhumation. As incredible as it may seem, the inhumation charge is not considered a felony in Mexico. However, crime association does carry a mandatory minimum of 20 years in prison. Santiago is eligible to be set free this year. Associations have pushed for him to remain in jail. At the time of this episode, Santiago is still in prison. He maintains he did not kill anyone. He only disposed of the bodies. And it was only people that were involved with the drug trade. Furthermore, he claims he never was tasked or would he ever agree to dissolve the bodies of women and children. Yet he might end up getting released from prison sooner rather than later. And with that, we come to the end of another Mexighost Tales. Again, this is another true crime case. Please let me know in the comments if you would like me to feature more of these cases. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook as the Mexighost. Don't forget, our handle in YouTube is @Mexighost. And we will see you on the next one, where we will explore another part of Mexico's other history.
Y celebraremos una gran fiesta mexicana juntos.
¿De qué fiesta hablas?
Noviembre 2.
¿Y qué celebran?
A los muertos.